They said loyalty mattered in our office, until loyalty became my biggest mistake. The day I found out my boss, Daniel, had taken credit for the project I worked on for 6 months, was the day everything changed. I watched him smile as the CEO congratulated him, saying, "You'll make a great director." My heart stopped. I was supposed to be in that meeting. That recognition was mine. But instead of confronting him, I smiled back. Because that was the exact moment I decided. I wasn't just going to survive, I was going to win. My name is Kinsley, and for the past 6 years the office has been more than my workplace. It was my second home. I'd get there before sunrise, when the hallway still smelled of industrial cleaner, and the only sound was the hum of the coffee machine brewing the first pot of the day. I worked as a senior project manager in a mid-sized tech firm in Boston. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. People used to call me the heart of the company. I trained new hires, stayed late when others left, and covered shifts when someone's kid got sick. Daniel, my direct supervisor, was charming in that perfectly rehearsed kind of way. He'd always say things like, "You're my right hand, Kinsley," or, "I couldn't do this without you." I believed him. Foolishly. At home, I lived alone in a small apartment overlooking the river. I'd often stay up late, typing reports with the faint glow of my desk lamp and the sound of rain tapping on the window. It was a quiet life, simple, predictable, safe. Until it wasn't. The director position had been open for months. Everyone whispered that I was the obvious choice. I had led 3 major product launches that boosted our revenue by nearly 40%. Even the CEO, Mr. Preston, once said during a meeting, "Kinsley's leadership is what this company needs." So when the internal announcement came out, Daniel Parker appointed as new director of operations, I froze. My coffee cup slipped from my hand, splattering across the white floor tiles. My name wasn't even mentioned. First, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe a temporary assignment. But then I saw the internal email thread. The one Daniel had accidentally left open on the shared server. It contained my entire proposal, my strategy, my data, even my slide designs. Word for word. He'd taken it all. The next day, I approached him in his glass-walled office. "Daniel, we need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. He leaned back in his chair, that same smirk curling at the corner of his mouth. "About what?" "The director role. You used my proposal." He laughed softly. "Kinsley, ideas don't belong to people. They belong to the company. Besides, you're good. But you're not ready to lead." His words burned like acid. Not ready to lead? I'd led him through every crisis for years. That night I sat on my balcony with a glass of cheap red wine, staring at the city lights flickering below. I kept replaying his words in my mind over and over until they stopped hurting and started fueling something else. Determination. The next morning, I walked into the office earlier than usual. Daniel wasn't there yet. His desk was spotless, except for his calendar left open. I noticed something. He was planning a strategic expansion meeting with Preston in 2 weeks. My project again, repackaged, renamed. That's when I decided I wouldn't let him win. Not this time. I didn't know how yet, but I knew this. Office revenge doesn't always come from anger. Sometimes it comes from clarity. I poured myself another cup of coffee, sat at my desk, and began drafting a new plan. Not for the company. For me. The following week the office air felt heavier. Or maybe that was just me. Every time Daniel passed by my desk, his cologne lingered like poison. Everyone treated him differently now. People smiled wider, laughed louder, eager to impress the new director. He strutted through the open floor like he owned the place. Maybe in a way he did. First, I tried to stay professional. I buried myself in work, focusing on the projects I still had control over. But every email, every meeting, every decision started running through him. "Let me review this first," he'd say with that fake managerial tone. Or worse, "Maybe I'll take it from here, Kinsley. You've done enough." It was suffocating. Then came the staff meeting that broke me. Daniel was presenting a quarterly progress report, one I had prepared the data for. He stood at the front of the room, gesturing confidently at slides I'd spent nights perfecting. My notes, my visuals, my words, even my phrasing. As he spoke, I noticed he'd left one of my comments visible in the corner of a slide. "Add financial projection graph, K." The room chuckled. "Oh, Kinsley," Daniel said smoothly. "Always so thorough. She helps me polish these reports." Polish, not create. My coworker's laughter stung more than I expected. I could feel my chest tighten as heat crawled up my neck. I forced a smile, pretending it didn't matter. But inside something snapped. That night I didn't go straight home. I sat in my car in the parking lot long after the sun went down. The building lights glowed against the glass, and from where I sat, I could see Daniel in his office, laughing with Preston over drinks. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I whispered to myself, "You'll regret this." But regret wasn't enough. I needed proof. So I started collecting it. Quietly. Every email he sent, every meeting he logged, every idea he borrowed. I backed up everything onto a private drive at home. I even recorded one of our conversations after he tried to humiliate me again in front of the team. It was during a Thursday morning briefing. He leaned across the table and said loudly, "Kinsley, maybe next time double-check your numbers before you send them out. We can't afford mistakes now that I'm running this department." I looked him dead in the eyes. "Those were your numbers, Daniel." He smirked. "Then I guess we both need to be more careful." The room fell silent. After the meeting, my friend Maya from HR pulled me aside. "Kins, you okay? That was brutal." I nodded, pretending to laugh it off. "Yeah, I'm fine." But I wasn't fine. I was furious. Maya hesitated. Then she whispered, "Off the record, be careful. There are rumors he's trying to restructure your position." My stomach dropped. "Restructure? As in fire me?" She didn't answer. That night I couldn't sleep. I paced the apartment barefoot, the city lights flickering through my blinds like blinking warnings. My laptop sat open on the dining table, the blue light reflecting off my glass of untouched wine. I reread the company policy on promotions and intellectual property. There it was, a clause stating that project ownership must be credited to the originator unless reassigned in writing. And Daniel never reassigned anything in writing. For the first time in weeks I smiled. Still, I had to be careful. One wrong move and I'd be out of a job or worse, blacklisted. So I played along. I said, "Yes, sir," in meetings, sent him reports like nothing happened, even congratulated him when the CEO praised his strategic foresight. All while building a case, quietly, meticulously. Every night, I'd save new evidence into a folder I labeled, "For the record." Every morning, I'd smile at him like nothing was wrong. And the more he underestimated me, the more powerful I felt. But he wasn't done yet. One Friday afternoon he called me into his office. His voice was overly cheerful. "Kinsley, I've been reviewing our team structure," he said, flipping through a folder. "I think your role would fit better under administrative support." I blinked. "You're demoting me?" "Not demoting, realigning." My nails dug into my palm. "You're taking my team away?" He leaned forward, smiling. "You'll still have plenty to do. Just less decision-making." He didn't realize, at that very moment he had sealed his fate. Because that was the day I stopped collecting evidence and started crafting his downfall. The weekend after Daniel realigned my role, I didn't leave my apartment. Friday night I came home late, later than I usually did, and threw my bag onto the couch. My keys hit the floor with a sharp clink that echoed through the empty room. The silence was unbearable. No emails. No coworkers. No noise, just the faint hum of the refrigerator and my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I poured a glass of wine, but even that felt pointless. I sat by the window looking down at the city. People laughing, living, unaware that someone above them was quietly falling apart. I'd given 6 years to that company. 6 years of late nights, skipped vacations, missed birthdays. I remembered my mom's voice on the phone once. "Kinsley, honey, you can't build your whole life around your job. It won't love you back." I had laughed then, but she was right. Now I was alone, and the company didn't even blink. Saturday morning, I woke up to an email from Daniel. The subject line, "Administrative update." He'd copied the entire management team. The message read, "Effective immediately, Kinsley will be assisting with departmental documentation and team scheduling. Please direct leadership decisions through my office." He stripped away my title with a few sentences. My inbox filled with polite replies. "Noted, Daniel. Got it, congrats again." Not a single message for me. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Then I slammed my laptop shut. My hands were shaking. That afternoon, I went for a walk just to breathe. The city was cold, and the air smelled like rain and exhaust. Every step felt heavy. I ended up at a small coffee shop I used to visit before work. The barista recognized me. "Long time no see," she smiled. "Rough week." I forced a laugh. "Something like that." When she handed me my latte, she'd drawn a little heart in the foam. I didn't realize how much I needed that. A small act of kindness. I sat there for almost 2 hours just watching strangers come and go. Couples holding hands. Students working on laptops. A man reading the newspaper, his brow furrowed. Ordinary life. Peaceful life. And I thought, when did mine stop being that? That night, I went home and opened my old project folders. Years of work, ideas, designs, reports. All mine. I found photos from company retreats, smiling faces, happy moments that now felt fake. In one of them, Daniel had his arm around my shoulder, both of us grinning at the camera. I stared at that photo for a long time, feeling my chest tighten. Tears came without warning, hot, uncontrollable, endless. I pressed my hands against my face, sobbing into the darkness. All those years, all that loyalty, and for what? To be erased? I cried until I couldn't anymore. Then came the silence again. A silence so deep it felt like the world had stopped. That's when my phone buzzed. A message from Maya. "Kins, I know things are bad, but I overheard something today. Daniel's planning to pitch your new client strategy as his own next week. You need to protect yourself." I stared at the message, my tears drying on my cheeks. Something inside me shifted. It wasn't just pain anymore. It was anger. Clean, sharp, focused. I stood up, wiped my face, and walked to the mirror. My reflection looked tired. Eyes red, hair messy. But behind all that, I saw something I hadn't in weeks. Resolve. "He thinks I'm weak," I whispered. "He thinks I'll just disappear." I leaned closer, voice trembling but fierce. "But he has no idea what I'm capable of." The next morning, I woke before dawn. I brewed my coffee black, no sugar, and sat at my desk with a notepad. The city outside was still asleep, wrapped in fog. On the top of the page, I wrote 4 words in bold letters. Take back everything. I began writing a list, not just of what Daniel had taken, but of what I still had. My credibility. My proof. My patience. And my voice. Each word was a reminder that I wasn't done yet. As the sun began to rise, filling the room with pale golden light, I closed my notebook and whispered, "This isn't the end. This is the beginning." That day, I returned to work not as a victim, but as a storm waiting to strike. Monday morning, I walked into the office with a smile no one expected. My coworkers looked confused, maybe even a little nervous. For weeks, they had seen me as the broken woman, the one Daniel humiliated publicly. But today I looked calm, composed, dangerous. Inside, I wasn't calm at all. My pulse raced, but my mind was razor sharp. I knew exactly what I was going to do. First, I needed information, real solid proof that Daniel had stolen my work. I already had the data and project files, but I needed confirmation from someone higher up. Someone he couldn't manipulate. That person was Maya, my quiet ally in HR. I waited until the lunch hour when most of the office was empty, and walked into her cubicle. "Maya, I need your help," I said softly. She hesitated. "Kins, are you sure you want to go down this road?" I nodded. "He's been stealing from me for months. And I can prove it." Her eyes widened. "You have evidence?" "Emails, drafts, meeting notes, audio recordings. Enough to make him choke." She took a deep breath. "Okay, tell me what you need." "I need timestamps," I said. "From the system logs, anything that shows I uploaded the proposals before he did." She bit her lip, thinking, "That's risky, but I can try." I reached out and squeezed her hand. "I'm not asking you to take sides. Just help me make things right." 2 days later, she slipped a flash drive into my hand during a casual hallway chat. "Be careful," she whispered. Inside were all the digital logs I needed. Proof that my original proposals were uploaded under my account weeks before Daniel's presentations. It was irrefutable. Phase 1 complete. Phase 2 was trickier, setting the trap. Daniel's ego was his weakness. He needed attention, praise, and control. So I gave him exactly that. I began feeding him small, harmless ideas, suggestions I knew the CEO would find interesting but ultimately flawed. For example, I recommended launching a product pilot in a market that wasn't ready, citing preliminary engagement. Daniel jumped on it immediately. "Great idea, Kinsley," he said with that smug grin. "You see, this is why I keep you around." I smiled back. "Of course, Daniel. I just want what's best for the company." He presented it to Preston later that week. It failed miserably, the data collapsed within days, and Preston questioned Daniel's judgment for the first time. That was the crack I needed. The following week, I scheduled a project overview meeting and invited both Daniel and Preston. Officially, it was to review department efficiency. Unofficially, it was the start of the end. I prepared a presentation, not flashy, just clean and factual. As the slides changed, I calmly discussed key milestones, referencing work I had contributed over the years. I made sure to include date stamps, quiet, subtle reminders of who had done what. Halfway through, Preston leaned forward. "Wait, these projections look familiar." I nodded politely. "They should. They were used in Daniel's strategic proposal last quarter. I developed the initial framework before that." Daniel shifted in his seat. "Kinsley, I think there's some confusion." I turned to him, keeping my tone steady. "Is there? Because the system logs, timestamps, and archive drafts all point to my original work." Preston raised an eyebrow. "Is that true, Daniel?" He stammered. Well, we collaborate." I didn't need to push further. I had planted the seed of doubt. After the meeting, Preston called me into his office privately. "Why didn't you bring this to my attention earlier?" he asked. I looked down. Because I didn't want to seem bitter. I thought hard work would speak for itself. He sighed. "I appreciate your professionalism, Kinsley. Leave this with me." As I left his office, I saw Daniel standing in the hallway, jaw tight, watching me. For the first time, he looked uneasy. That night, he sent me a message. "We need to talk. Now." I ignored it. Instead, I opened my folder labeled "For the Record" and uploaded everything. Every document, every email, every recording, to an encrypted cloud drive. Then I printed a copy for Preston, sealed in a plain envelope. Phase 3 exposure. The next morning, the company was buzzing. Rumors spread fast. Daniel's failed pilot project had cost the company nearly $250,000 in wasted development. Preston called an emergency executive meeting. I wasn't invited officially, but Maya texted me. "He's cornered. You did it." I smiled, sipping my coffee. For the first time in months, it didn't taste bitter. But this wasn't over. Not yet. Daniel still had influence and people who believed in him. If I wanted true justice, I needed one last move. Something undeniable. Something poetic. Something that would make him understand exactly what it feels like to lose everything you built. And as I stared out my office window, the plan began to take shape, simple, clean, and devastating. He took my voice. Now I would take his. The next week was a storm, quiet, invisible, but brewing underneath the polished glass walls of the company. Daniel was tense, paranoid even. His usual swagger was gone, replaced by restless pacing and clipped tones during meetings. I could tell he knew something was wrong. By Tuesday, the whispers had spread. Preston had started reviewing Daniel's leadership files. HR was rechecking promotion records. Maya told me the audit team was quietly asking questions. Still, Daniel tried to act like everything was normal. He summoned me to his office that afternoon. "Kinsley," he said, forcing a smile, "I think there's been some confusion about recent projects. We should clear things up before Preston gets the wrong impression." "Confusion?" I repeated softly, taking a seat. "You mean the part where you took credit for my work?" His jaw tightened. "You're emotional. I've always supported you." I cut him off. "You supported me when it made you look good. You erased me when it didn't." He slammed his hand on the desk. "Watch your tone, Kinsley. You're still under my supervision." I leaned forward, calm and cold. "Not for long." He blinked. "What's that supposed to mean?" I stood, adjusting my blazer. "You'll find out soon enough." And then I walked out, leaving him in the silence he once used to intimidate me. The setup. Wednesday morning, I arrived earlier than usual. My hands were steady as I placed a neatly labeled envelope on Preston's desk. Confidential Internal Fraud Report. Inside were all the materials, the timestamp logs from Maya, the copied proposals, the voice recording of Daniel's admission that ideas belonged to the company, and even the messages where he mocked my emotional leadership. I didn't include any dramatic explanations, just facts. Hard, undeniable facts. By noon, the investigation was official. Daniel stormed out of his office red-faced, demanding to know who reported him. The team stared in silence. I stayed at my desk typing, pretending not to notice, but my heart raced like a drum in my chest. An hour later, he was summoned to the executive floor. Preston's office door closed. What followed was a muffled argument that lasted nearly 40 minutes. Then the door opened, and Daniel walked out pale, his tie loose, eyes hollow. Preston didn't even look at him. For the first time since this began, I felt justice. But it wasn't satisfaction yet. Not until everyone knew the truth. The fall. The next morning, an all-staff email appeared in everyone's inbox. Subject: Leadership Announcement. Effective immediately, Daniel Parker has been relieved of his duties as Director of Operations pending internal review. Interim leadership will be assumed by Kinsley Roberts. My breath caught in my throat. For a full minute I just stared at the screen. Then I smiled. The office buzzed like a shaken hive. Some people congratulated me quietly. Others avoided my eyes, guilty for siding with him. Maya hugged me in the hallway, whispering, "You did it, Kins. You really did it." But for me it wasn't about revenge anymore, not entirely. It was about restoring truth. Still, poetic justice had one more verse left to play. That afternoon, Daniel came to pack up his office. The same one he once called his kingdom. I watched from my desk as he shoved files into boxes, muttering curses under his breath. Then as he turned to leave, our eyes met through the glass wall. He stopped glaring. "You think you've won, don't you?" I stood slowly, walking to the door. "No, Daniel. I just stopped losing." He scoffed, shaking his head. "You'll regret this." I smiled faintly. "Maybe. But at least it'll be my mistake this time." He left without another word. When the elevator doors closed behind him, the office felt lighter. The tension, the fear, the manipulation gone. I returned to my desk, exhaling for the first time in what felt like months. My computer chimed with a message from Preston. "You've proven remarkable composure, Kinsley. Let's talk about your future here." I looked around at the team I once led, the office I once dreaded entering, and for the first time it felt mine. Not because I took it, because I earned it back. That evening I stayed late just like I used to. The office was quiet again, peaceful. I made myself a cup of coffee, the aroma filling the air, and stood by the window overlooking the city lights. Down below, people were still moving, living, chasing dreams, unaware that, high above, one woman had just rewritten her story. I whispered to my reflection, "Revenge doesn't heal you. It reminds you who you were before they broke you." And in that moment I knew my battle was over. Not with Daniel. With myself. The weeks that followed were quiet. Peaceful in a way I had almost forgotten existed. The office no longer echoed with Daniel's sharp voice or his endless demands. People started laughing again in the break room. Collaboration returned. Not out of fear, but respect. And for the first time in years I wasn't surviving at work. I was living it. I had meetings with Preston and other executives. They wanted me to officially take the director position, the one Daniel had stolen. But I hesitated. For so long that title had been the center of my pain, my obsession, my revenge. I wasn't sure if I wanted it anymore, not like this. That night I stayed in the office alone again. The city lights shimmered outside, painting reflections across the glass walls. I sat there remembering everything that had led to this moment, the humiliation, the betrayal, the quiet plotting, the revenge. And then I realized something I hadn't before. Revenge gives you closure, but it doesn't give you peace. A letter to myself. I opened my notebook and began to write. Not a report, not a plan, but a letter. To myself. Dear Kinsley, you fought back not because you hated him, but because you finally loved yourself enough to stop letting him win. You didn't destroy him, you exposed him. You didn't rise by revenge, you rose by truth. Remember this feeling. the power of reclaiming your voice. But also remember the danger of letting vengeance define your worth. You are more than what they did to you. By the time I finished, tears blurred the ink. I wasn't crying out of sadness, it was relief. A deep cleansing release. The conversation. A few days later, Preston called me into his office. He smiled warmly. Kinsley, the board was impressed. They want you to lead the division permanently. The position is yours if you want it. I paused. Thank you, Preston. But I think I'd like to recommend someone else. He raised an eyebrow. Really? Yes, I said softly, Maya. She's been with me since the start. She understands the culture I want to build here. One that values people, not politics. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. That's admirable. Most people would have taken the power for themselves. I smiled faintly. Maybe before I would have too. But power isn't what I was missing. Integrity was. He extended his hand. You've got both. And that's rare. When I left his office, I didn't feel smaller for walking away from the title. I felt free. The new beginning. Weeks later, I officially transitioned into a consulting role, helping restructure company culture. My days were no longer about climbing ladders or proving my worth. They were about helping others find theirs. Sometimes people asked me, "Aren't you angry about what Daniel did?" And I'd smile. Not anymore. He taught me something priceless. How dangerous it is to let ambition blind your humanity. Because the truth was, Daniel didn't lose because I outsmarted him. He lost because he had already become everything he once despised. And I won not because I took his place but because I refused to become like him. Final message. On my last day in that office, I walked past Daniel's old room, now Maya's. She was leading a meeting, confident and kind, the way leadership should be. I watched for a moment, proud. Then I turned toward the elevator, the same one Daniel had taken the day he left. But this time I wasn't leaving in defeat. As the doors closed, I whispered to myself, forgive but don't forget. Heal but don't harden. Rise but don't lose your soul. The elevator descended, and with every floor I felt lighter. Outside, the city breathed beneath me. A million lights, 1,000 stories. And somewhere among them, another woman was probably sitting in her office, doubting herself after being betrayed. To her I'd say, they can take your credit, your title, your dignity for a while, but they can't take your truth. And one day that truth will rise and speak for you. Kinsley. Narration. Gentle, reflective. When I first told this story, I began with a betrayal. A man who took everything from me. My trust, my credit, my title. But what I didn't realize back then was that losing all of that was the only way I'd ever find myself. That office was once my battlefield. Every meeting, every coffee break, every fake smile. All weapons in a war I didn't start but had to finish. And I did finish it. Not with destruction but with truth. A soft breath, pause. Kinsley. Revenge isn't about ruining someone's life. It's about taking back control of your own. When Daniel betrayed me, I wanted to see him fall. But when it finally happened, I didn't feel joy. I felt clarity. Because the real victory wasn't watching him lose. It was realizing I had already won the moment I stopped letting his actions define me. Camera pans over the skyline. Morning light flooding through office windows. I've learned that power gained through deceit will always crumble. But dignity, once reclaimed, can rebuild everything. So, to anyone watching this, if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, if you've ever been silenced, overlooked, or underestimated, I want you to remember this. You are not weak because you were betrayed. You are powerful because you survived it. She closes her laptop, picks up her coffee mug. The same one from the beginning, a symbol of resilience. Every scar tells a story. And every story can either chain you to your past or set you free. Mine set me free. Call to action. Emotional ending. Kinsley looks directly into the camera, tone warm but strong. If my story resonated with you, if you've ever faced betrayal at work or anywhere else, hit like to show that you rose above it too. Leave a comment below and tell me, what's the hardest lesson you've learned about trust? And if you want more real, emotional stories about power, justice, and redemption, subscribe to the channel. Because every week, we uncover new tales of courage and revenge, where pain turns into purpose. Soft pause, faint smile. And remember, sometimes revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting back to yourself. Music swells, emotional piano and strings blend. Kinsley, final line, voice soft but powerful. They took my title, but I took back my peace. And that's the kind of victory no one can ever steal. Screen fades to black. Text appears. If you've ever been betrayed, your story matters too. Subscribe for more true-to-life revenge stories. Watch next. When my best friend stole my dream job, and I took it back.